Hello everyone, I am Finding Findings, and in this video, we have 3 scary RV Reddit stories. Before we get into those stories, make sure to smash that subscribe button and give the like button a Finding experience. Now, let's get into these stories. I didn't choose the van life chose me. Something I said often as it was the outro to all my YouTube videos. I've been living in my van for roughly 8 months and I'm done after this. Today was like any other day. I woke up and started my boring, antisocial life I loved so much. I edited a few videos, ate some leftover meatloaf, and played some video games, you know the basics. I parked the van on the side of a campground up near the Colorado Rockies. It was getting late and I wanted to use what sunlight I had left to set up camp. The snow was pretty low at that point, probably from a snowfall a few days prior. I got out my fire pit and got a little fire going. I was the only vehicle at the car lot, but I guess that didn't seem weird because it was in the middle of nowhere. As the night grew near, I received a warning on my radio about a blizzard that was due to hit in the next hour. I put my things away and got into my van, bracing for the blizzard. I wasn't too worried as I had a propane heater inside the van in case it got too cold. The blizzard hit and it hit hard. The wind rocking my van, snow covering the windows and sealing me inside the van. I panicked a little, to be honest. The thought of freezing to death flooded my thoughts. I remember laying in bed with my blankets wrapped around me and dozing off. At some point, it got really quiet. So quiet, it woke me up. I figured the wind had died down and it finally settled, so I sat up. I wondered if I should go assess the situation and see how bad it was. I'd say it went on for about 3 hours, so it got pretty deep. I decided to make some coffee and warm up before I went out. I started to get dressed and put on my boots. Just as I pull up my boot, a noise catches my attention. What sounds like something trotting through deep snow is making its way towards my van. Heavy footsteps approach from what I figure was about 30 yards out. I don't move a muscle. Even my breath slowed down to basically nothing. My body was riddled with goosebumps as fear pulsed through me. My first thought was moose, but then there's also bears out here. I couldn't see anything through this thick snow lining my windows. The footsteps were about 10 yards away at this point, still making their way towards me. My body begins to shake violently. I'm not sure if it was from the cold or the fear, but I couldn't stop. I could hear what sounded like humming coming from the direction of the noises. It was very low and didn't really sound like anything I knew. It was getting closer and closer. The humming and footsteps were about 5 yards away now, and I was almost certain this was no moose or bear. The footsteps stopped right outside the rear of my van. The only windows I have are the front seat windows, so I can't see anything out of the rear. A voice breaks the silence, cold and small. "Hello in there. May I have a word with you?" it said in a voice from what sounded like a little girl. I almost melted into the ground at that point. My body was absolutely trembling, sweat pouring out from all over my body. Terror doesn't describe the feeling I had at that moment in time. I remained silent, refusing to utter even a breath. Now I really knew it wasn't an animal. First of all, that walking sounded way too heavy to be a little girl. It's almost 1 a.m. right after a bad blizzard, and it's out in the middle of nowhere. No weapon or anything really to defend myself with. I felt absolutely helpless. "Don't be afraid. I'm not going to hurt you. I just need help," it said. Please do not ignore me. It's very rude, it said in a slightly deeper tone. What? I spit out, not being able to talk from the terror I was in. Is there a problem? It asked. I slowly picked my head up and looked at the back of the van. I gulped, took a deep breath, and forced out what little I could say. What's the problem? I said through chattering teeth. No, not a problem. I just wanted to ask if you had a tooth for me, it said. A tooth? I thought to myself. You need a tooth? I asked the voice. Yes, just a tooth, it asked happily. My mind was in a million different places at this point. Who the heck was I talking to? What did they want with a tooth? Was it some sort of monster you hear about in some Travel Channel show? I wasn't really sure what it was, but I was afraid nonetheless. I began to reason with myself. Maybe another car pulled up and I didn't realize it, and they wanted to play a prank on me because they recognized the van. I don't have a tooth. Can you please go away? This isn't funny, I said. The sweet voice that asked so kindly for a tooth moments ago changed almost immediately into a twisted, dark voice like some kind of demon. Give me one of your teeth willingly, or I will rip the teeth from your skull one by one, it yelled. I began to search through my van for a weapon. Something I could fight this thing with if I had to. All I had was a hammer that was stashed under the engine hood in the front seat. I raised the hood and grabbed the hammer. I stood in the van, hammer in hand like some dollar store Thor. I turned around, and that's when I remembered the shark tooth hanging from my visor. I ripped the tooth from the visor and went to the back of the van. I have a tooth for you, I said, body still shaking uncontrollably from the adrenaline. Throw it out now, he yelled again so loud it shook the van. I slid the van door open only to be met with a wall of snow. I stuffed the tooth into the snow and slid the door closed and locked it. A loud bang on the back doors and a loud scratch followed all the way from the back to the side door and stopped. Thanks for the tooth, it said back in a little sweet voice from before. The humming began again and the loud heavy footsteps made their way away from my van. I curled up in the fetal position on the ground of the van until I couldn't hear the footsteps anymore. I jumped up, turned the engine over, and began to let it heat up. I sat for about 15 minutes, then I began the drive back home for my last day as a van life YouTuber. I'm still not sure what to chalk it up to, but I don't see myself going around the Rockies again, ever. Something strange happened to me at Mount Rainier National Park. I wanted to post this here to maybe get some feedback on something that happened while camping in my van life in Mount Rainier National Park yesterday. The circumstances around what happened are very foggy as I have very limited recollection of what happened as everything happened in a haze. But pictures that definitely prove that something, whatever it was, did in fact happen. Let me give some context. I, 23 male, went to a van life meetup in Enumclaw, Washington over the weekend. The city is close by Mount Rainier National Park, and because I had already made the trip, I figured I might as well camp overnight nearby the park in a dispersed camping spot in the forest. I brought some ingredients to make some carne asada tacos, downloaded some movies, and was ready for a nice cozy evening in my van. Something which I do on most weekends in various campsites around the state. I hiked around the campsite, which was very nice, save for the large amount of trash which was littered about, which actually made me really sad. The trail led to 2 fire pits not too far from where I'd parked, and it ended at a quiet riverbank. It seemed like it was a spot that local teens might go to drink and smoke weed. There was even a log bench with the words 420 painted colorfully on its seat. I wasn't sure how recently people had been here, and there were open, half-drunk cans around the fire pits which seemed cold. I wasn't quite sure if this meant anything in the moment, but it was a bit on the warmer side outside at around 70 degrees. I decided that it likely wasn't an active camp and stayed. The spot wasn't terribly isolated. Every 30 minutes or so, someone would drive by to claim other campsites down the lonely fire road. Some trucks and even an RV. People like me looking to spend time out in nature and who don't want to shell out the extra cash for a campsite. After exploring the area, I went back to my van to start making dinner. I used a satellite communicator to check in with my friends and family as I didn't have any services this deep into the forest. The sun was setting as I sat down to eat my tacos. I left my doors open to let the air flow, and the cool breeze felt amazing. But after eating and when it was quiet, I started noticing a sound in the distance. They sounded like gunshots. Really almost like cannon shots. Deep, rhythmic booms echoing in the valley every few seconds. What accompanied those sounds was a still distant, yet closer noises of a chainsaw in the distance. Now neither of these noises are very uncommon to hear when camping on fire roads, to be honest. People in Washington love their guns, and it wouldn't be unheard of for someone to use a chainsaw to cut down larger chunks into firewood. Summer fire ban be damned. I also saw some campers start to leave, including an RV, which was particularly unusual. Finding a campsite for an RV can be hard, but it is especially hard to find one at night. The rule is to always find camp before the sun sets, and the sun had only just disappeared from the sky. Something spooked them, and I wondered if it would be wise to follow their lead. However, I had unwashed dishes on the counter, and I was in no mood to move, and so I didn't. I did, however, triple check that all my doors and windows were locked before drifting to sleep. That night can only be described as hazy and disorienting. I have very little memory of anything that happened, but the evidence that something had most definitely happened was very evident. I remember being awake in the pitch black of night, struggling to breathe. Not choking, my lungs were filling with air, but I remember the feeling of drowning. I remember the pleading desperation for air. I remember trying to see with my sight, being wholly consumed by the darkness in front of me. I have a memory of trying to punch out a window to no avail. I remember making my way to the side doors of my van to open the door to breathe, and then I woke up in bed and the sun was in the sky. I would have chalked this up to a really bad dream, but the damage around me was evident. There was definitely a struggle. Some of my window blinds were sliced and ruined. One of my windows had scratch marks from the inside. Even the air vent on my ceiling was obliterated from the inside. I didn't think I was even capable of this. And the van was well ventilated, so I'm unsure as to why I would have trouble breathing in the first place. My carbon monoxide detector was silent, and the van was well ventilated after cooking. I have no idea what possibly could have caused me to do this and ruin my lovely van. I saw no indication of any kind of forced entry, and all the damage was done from the inside by me trying to get out, I guess? My knuckles were very sore, as were my feet, as I probably hit them hard on the various cabinets in the van on my way out. A pole I used to prop up my canopy was strangely out of place, in the middle of the floor and broken at the ends. I have never had any form of night terrors or sleepwalking before this, except for one incident, which was also nearby Mount Rainier National Park. A few months ago, my friends and I were driving through Enumclaw trying to find a camping spot we might be able to post up at. It was nighttime already, and as I said before, finding camp at night can be pretty difficult. We were driving down the same road I had taken for my recent trip, and we had gotten a tip from a local about a mountain which had some good dispersed camping. We were tired and hungry and just wanted to start setting up camp. We passed a few spots, mostly mud and rock, none too level and none too appealing. We decided to pick the least muddy spot we could find, and I helped them to set up their tents. It was one of my first trips in my van, and I was excited to test it out. As we were setting up camp, we heard the wind blowing ominously through the trees, causing them to creak loudly, threatening us with a fall. And this particular area of the mountain was very unleveled in the most unsettling way. So we thus referred to this campsite as the ominous slant. When we slept that night, a few things of note happened. My friend Melissa claims to have heard squeaking noises as if someone were wearing a latex bodysuit. She refers to the sound as the happy gimper. Kurt, her boyfriend, swears he heard a bear that night. However, the worst of it was when, in the middle of the night, they both heard me yell bloody murder from my van. Kurt rushed out of the tent, tripping a few times in his haste, and rushed over to swing open the doors. But I was asleep. He asked what was wrong, and he thought that someone was attacking me. I had no idea what he was talking about. I have no memory at all of any nightmares preceding it or anything. I have no idea what any of this means. I've been on many trips in the van since with different people, and nothing like this has happened anywhere else. It has only happened when I've been in Mount Rainier National Park. To be honest, thinking about the feeling of drowning in darkness makes me very much not want to revisit the subject anytime soon. So I don't believe I'll be visiting the park anytime in the near future for camping either. Why I quit living in my van. When I was 25, I traveled across America in a modified van. For 3 months, I didn't have to worry about rent. I got my food from the dumpsters behind pizza shops and supermarkets. When I needed gas, I played my guitar on a street corner until my cup was full of change. A nationwide gym membership took care of showers. And as for friendship, in almost every town I visited, I found a bonfire surrounded by other travelers like me. The only real problem was finding somewhere to sleep. Depending on local laws, residential streets, city parks, and 24-hour parking lots might be off limits. The places left over were usually exposed, isolated, and dangerous. Places that make you suspect that the driver of that big semi-truck idling beside you is a serial killer. Places that magnify rustling in the bushes or make you wonder if you heard laughter from just outside your van. At some point, almost every conversation around the bonfire turned to the search for safe spots to park. I was at a field party, watching the sunset and wondering miserably if I was going to have to drive overnight yet again when a teenage crust punk nudged my elbow.
"There's this map.
They said, running their fingers through their dreadlocks.
It's got some sweet spots, marked in red."
They shoved the biggest folding map I'd ever seen into my hands. It was the color of charcoal, everything black or gray except for the crimson dots.
"I tried a couple of them. Quiet, no cops. It's just,
They hesitated.
well, I guess you'll find out.
They held up a black-nailed hand.
So, later."
Sirens and flashing blue lights appeared at the edge of the tall grass, cops coming to break up the party. Everyone split, and I peeled out of the gravel lot in the direction of the first red marker. The sweet spot turned out to be a parking lot behind a small warehouse. A single lamp, like a nightlight, glowed over its padlocked door. It wasn't abandoned, but it didn't seem like anyone was going to come scare me off anytime soon, either. The warehouse was the only building for miles in any direction. I had no idea what it could be for, but did it really matter? The spot was perfect. I set up the van around back and drifted off to the sound of wind and the aspen trees. When I climbed out to take a leak, the digital clock read 2:34. Even the wind was quiet. I'd barely finished watering the dandelions when something moved in the warehouse behind me. As I crept back to the van, the noise got clearer. Whatever was in there was jiggling and slopping around like coagulated soup, and it was huge. It threw itself against the warehouse door hard enough to make the padlock shake. Once, twice, 3 times. Then it let out a low, sad moan and fell silent. Of all the weird, alien burbling sounds I just heard, that moan was the worst, because it sounded so human. I woke up to bluebirds and sunshine. The odd warehouse was still locked up tight, and I wondered if I just dreamt the whole thing. Either way, a few freaky noises were nothing compared to the dangers I was used to. Drug addicts, sadistic cops, curious bears. I spent the day hiking up an icy creek with strangers I met at a trailhead. And when the weather turned nasty, I found a cozy public library. On my way out, I spotted an Italian restaurant full of couples and asked the owner if he'd let me play a couple 90s tunes on my guitar for the candlelight dining crowd. When he said yes, I made enough cash to eat there myself and pay for gas all the way to Texas. After dinner, I set out for the nearest dot on my strange map. It turned out to be a closed-down fishing supply shop along a deserted country road. Puck's Live Bait, the sign read. But it didn't look like the gravel lot had seen any life for a long time. The store's distinguishing feature was a plastic statue of a smiling baby holding up a fish. It was over 8 feet tall, but chipped and fading paint made it look like an abandoned doll. There was something about those unblinking plastic eyes that I didn't like. But I'd just eaten my first real meal in weeks and washed it down with wine. I could put up with some creepiness for a little bit of shut-eye. I parked so that the van was hidden from the road, reclined the driver's seat, and drifted into a dreamless sleep. 3:20 read my digital clock. I wondered groggily why my eyes were open. Then I heard it again, tapping on the van window. I almost didn't want to look. What if I turned and saw a pair of gigantic plastic eyes? I mustered the courage to put my seat up and saw an old man in a rubber fishing hat and rain slicker. A light drizzle was falling outside. The sound got more insistent. It was almost metallic, and I wondered what the old man was tapping with. I rolled my window down an inch. Hello? I mumbled.
Howdy, neighbor.
The man's eyes were cheerful, but his mouth barely moved. Like it was somehow full. It was the strangest expression I'd ever seen.
I'm here for bait.
Stared, dumbfounded.
This is the bait store.
The man's voice rose like a tea kettle until he was practically screaming. And I want my bait. I noticed with horror that the man's fingers had come through the top of the window. In his right hand, he held the fishing knife he'd been tapping with. I reversed as hard as I could. The man didn't fall. He just watched me speed out of the gravel lot, and I'd swear the eyes of the giant plastic baby did too. I didn't stop until I saw the lights of a 24-hour gas station. My tank was low anyway. so I pulled in to fill up and get myself under control. My knuckles were white around the wheel and I could hear my own heartbeat thundering in my ears. It was such a relief to see those familiar sights I'd always taken for granted. Rows of unhealthy snacks, week-old hot dogs turning on the roller grill, coffee in styrofoam cups. An attendant in a red visor and vest uniform whistled while he wiped down the slushy machine. I grabbed some comfort food to soothe my heaving stomach and walked up to the cash register.
Howdy, neighbor.
The attendant greeted me. It was the old man from the bait shop. Those same painfully happy eyes. That mouth swollen half shut like it was holding in a secret.
I just saw you.
I said flatly. I couldn't believe it.
How are you here? You're not on your roads anymore, neighbor. You're on our roads now.
The old man grinned. His teeth were sparkling white, almost horse-sized, so large that they didn't fit in his mouth. I sprinted to the van and grabbed my phone, ready to call the police, the fire department, anybody. No service. No matter how far I zoomed out on my Maps app, all I saw was green. The old man held the knife to my window. He ground his enormous teeth together excitingly. A fat glob of drool dribbled down his chin. Like before, I tried the reverse, but the van lurched strangely. The tires. He'd slashed the tires. If he hit the window any harder, it might shatter.
Go away,
I shrieked. Just like that, the old man disappeared. The lights of the gas station immediately went out. I sat in the darkness, listening to my own ragged breaths, until a knife stabbed straight down through the metal roof.
What's wrong, neighbor?
The old man laughed.
Don't you want a slushie?
His next jab missed my ear by an inch. I screamed. The wheels would get destroyed if I drove, but better than me. I swerved, but I wasn't going fast enough to fling away the attacker hacking away at my roof. I pulled out onto the empty road, trying to build up speed, and I slammed on the brakes. With a shriek, a red uniform shape flew through my high beams. I accelerated forward, but I didn't hear any thump. I clenched my teeth against the sound of metal scraping on asphalt. My rims weren't going to last much longer. I had to get off the road. But how? The charcoal-colored map that had gotten me into this was still in the passenger seat. I stopped in the middle of the deserted road to get my bearings. As I studied the map, I realized that some of the strange gray lines might indicate a different kind of road, like the kind that I was currently on. If I was right, there should be a turnoff to a place called Yellow Vale before too long. From there, I could connect to one of the red points and finally escape from wherever this was. My van had other plans. At least the exit for Yellow Vale was in sight when it finally broke down. With no other options, I stuffed only what was necessary into my backpack and started off on foot. My headlamp was the only light beneath the starless sky. A beacon for anything hunting out there in the dark. Nothing moved, not even the wind. But somehow the stillness made it worse. According to the map, I turned right after the exit and, about 2 miles down from the road, I'd find a red point. Exactly what it would be, whether safe or deadly, there was no way to know. I walked up the exit ramp like it was a sidewalk. It's not like there were any other cars on the road. I paused below the sign for Yellow Vale 6. The color and text were wrong somehow. Like whoever had made it knew what a road sign was but had never actually seen one. I reached out to touch it, but its surface burbled like acid toward my hand. I pulled away and kept walking. The same dead trees, stretching on forever in every direction. The same silence. I saw a pool of light in the abyss. getting closer with every step. Soon I was close enough to see what it was. A rest area. A little brown brick structure with restrooms, vending machines, trash cans, and benches. A beige RV was parked in front. Was this my red point? I just started up the ramp when I heard scuffling behind me. A pack of skinless, dog-like things were crossing the road behind me. A few of them froze in the beam of my headlamp, snarling. They clawed the pavement, bent their raw bodies to attack the light. They were coming for the light. I hated giving up my vision, but I had no choice. I switched off my headlamp. The darkness filled with howls, angry, confused yips, and the clatter of paws on pavement. I fixed my eyes on the rest area and tried not to think about unseen teeth sinking into my legs. By the time I was halfway up the ramp, I could no longer hear them. I checked out the RV first. Its door was off its hinges, and there was no light inside. I switched my headlamp back on and climbed the stairs. It was like a time capsule from the 1980s had exploded inside. Star Wars bedsheets on an overturned mattress, shattered wood paneling, a shredded stretched Armstrong, and a dried out, half-eaten corpse hanging from the ceiling by its smiley-faced tie. I backed slowly out of the RV, wondering if I'd seen those skinless hounds waiting patiently for their meal, but the parking lot was deserted. The lights were on in the rest area, but the map frames and shelves were empty. I'd just begun to explore the men's restroom when the door creaked shut somewhere outside. I wasn't alone. I thought of the half-eaten corpse in the RV outside and scurried into a bathroom stall. Heavy footsteps, a squeaky wheel, a wet, slopping sound. I pulled my knees up to my chest. A stall door flew open. More wet, slopping sounds. Through the gap beneath the stall door, I saw the bottom half of a janitorial uniform. There was a push on the door, then a slam. Huh? Anybody in there? I held my breath, and the thing outside started pulling the door off its hinges. I shut my eyes tight. You white man? Don't tell me you're another druggie. I was face to face with one very confused South Carolina custodian. I wanted to hug the guy, but I figured I'd already freaked him out enough. I rushed outside, saw the brochures, the maps, the tourists and butterflies and morning sunshine. I felt myself slammed against a wall. 2 officers cuffed me, and I felt the charcoal-colored map pulled from my grasp. The officers spun me around.
Don't touch his skin till he's been debriefed.
A bald white guy in a suit warned. Once we were away from curious onlookers, he held up the map.
I want you to tell me what you think this is.
It, shows places you can spend the night. Places where people don't go.
Places where people don't go.
The bald man sneered.
You got that part right, son. 2 right.
He flipped open a notepad.
Now I'm gonna ask you a couple things, and you best answer honestly. We'll know if you're lying. Have you looked in a mirror in the past 48 hours? Have you exchanged fluids with any entity within the past 48 hours? Can you tell me who the president is? Do you remember your mother's face?
I'd been interrogated by police before, but never like this. The weird questions seemed to go on forever. Finally, the man stepped away and made a phone call. When he finished, the officers removed the cuffs.
I'd warn you not to come back to this place after midnight.
The bald man sighed.
But from the look on your face, I think you've learned your lesson already.
He and the 2 other officers walked down the grassy hill to an unmarked white SUV. So plain and soccer momish, it was almost funny. I never saw them again, but I slept in my own bed ever since.